Bears under 9. You could go under minus 125. That's what it is right now at Caesars. You could also go under 9.5 alt minus 160. State your case for the Bears under and why you think it's going to be, like we think, hard to win 10 games in that division.
Yeah, expectations are just way, way too high for a head coach in Matt Eberflus who in 2 seasons has won 10 games. And you have a rookie quarterback. I've never seen a rookie quarterback have this sort of expectation to start his career. I mean, I think Caleb Williams is going to be a really good player. Like, I liked him at USC. He won the Heisman Trophy. He's really talented, but that doesn't mean he has to be really good in 2024. Like, that could be later on down the line, but the expectation for the Bears is to make the playoffs and be really good. And I think they have some significant holes on that roster, none other being like the offensive line. The offensive line is a little bit shaky. Now you have a rookie quarterback behind a shaky offensive line. Defensively, they didn't really do much to address that side of the ball. I'm sure Eberflus is probably a little bit annoyed about that. He would never say anything, but I'm sure he's a little bit annoyed that he didn't get a 3 technique. They didn't really do anything, even though they did make those improvements in the second half of last season. I think there's just too many question marks on the offensive line and on the defensive line, despite the trade for Montez Sweat at the midway point last year, to want to buy in on this team with the rookie quarterback. Like, I know they have the nice flashy toys. You trade for Keenan Allen. You got Roma Dunze in the draft. You signed DeAndre Swift and all that stuff. Yeah, if we're playing 7-on-7, great. Sign me up for the Chicago Bears, but that's not the reality in the NFL. So I like the under. Like, if they win 10 games, I'll tip the cap. But for a rookie quarterback to have those kind of expectations, I'm always going to push back against that.
Okay, I agree. If they go 10-7 to beat you, so be it. So Wes Reynolds stepped out a little bit. Wes has the Panthers to win the division.
I love that.
He also has. Has the.
I don't think you love the bet, do you?
I mean, at the price, you're looking at a division where, I mean, do you really want to back Atlanta or any of these teams? Like I didn't pick the Carolina Panthers, but I see where he's coming from because I think the Panthers could be one of those worst to first teams. We see it every year. Why can't it be Carolina?
I want to talk to him tomorrow.
There's a lot of reasons it can't be Carolina.
You don't like Dave Canales?
Huh?
Dave Canales. I mean, we don't. If Dave Canales is a really good coach and
rehabilitates
Bryce Young,
there's a lot of. He's a first-time head coach.
He is.
He's got a second-year quarterback who stunk as a rookie. There's a lot of go on and on. There's a lot of things about the Panthers I don't like. Now, I'm all for taking a contrarian view to the NFL and not going with chalk all the way down the line. But the Panthers are going to be pathetic. I think they're still going to be pathetic.
So he also took the Vikings to make the playoffs.
Yes.
You took the Vikings to make the playoffs. So anti-Bears. Everyone likes the Lions and the Packers. What's your why do you think the Vikings could do this?
Sam Darnold?
I think it's Sam Darnold to start the year, just based on what we've been reading all throughout the spring phase, and I'm sure it'll translate to the training camp as well. And I think they want to really be patient with J.J. McCarthy. Every Vikings beat reporter that we've talked to, they said, hey, like this is, like we want to bring him along slowly, and unless he wows them at training camp, I would expect it to be Sam Darnold. And I get it. Sam Darnold has had not a great career. He's underperformed his draft status being 3rd overall many years back. However, this is the most ideal situation he's ever been in. And I think that Kevin O'Connell being not a quarterback whisperer, because I hate that phrase, but I mean, he really is a nice offensive mind. I mean, the guy won a game with Josh Dobbs having been on the team for 3 days.
Yep.
Like, he clearly knows what he's doing. I think that coaching staff knows what they're doing. And I really like the roster. Offensive line, check. You have really 2 good tackles. You got a pretty solid center. You can protect the quarterback. Skill positions, Justin Jefferson, maybe the best receiver in football. Addison now entering year 2. He was pretty good last year as a rookie. You get TJ Hockenson. He's coming off the ACL injury, but he should be back by like late September, early October. Now that adds a 3rd pass catcher to that unit there. Running back, you pick up Aaron Jones from your rival Green Bay Packers. I thought Aaron Jones was a really good running back. Now he has trouble staying healthy, but when he's on the field, he's really good. And then defensively, I think this is where they're being underrated. Brian Flores is a really respected defensive mind, but this year they actually got him some pieces. He was making chicken salad out of you-know-what last season, trying to blitz, trying to do all these creative things because they didn't necessarily have the personnel. They signed Jonathan Grenard from Houston. They pick up Andrew Van Ginkel as well from Miami as they reunite. Flores and Van Ginkel with the Dolphins many years back. I think defensively, question marks in the secondary, but in the front 7, I like what they've done to where I think Chicago and Minnesota are pretty neck and neck, and that's not how the market sees it. The market sees the Vikings as a distant 4th-place team. I don't agree with that, and I would not be surprised, and I think that this is going to happen, that Minnesota will have more wins this season than Chicago. Like, I think the Vikings at 3-1 to make the playoffs are interesting, and I also wrote about Kevin O'Connell potentially as a coach coach of the year guy at 25-1 because that win total of 6.5, he's got a pretty long leash to go ahead and impress some of the voters there. If they win 9-10 games, that's going over your win total by 3-4 games. I mean, I think a lot of voters could gravitate towards something like that, and Kevin O'Connell's a really respected coach to where I think he's going to get a lot of the credit since the quarterbacks aren't really highly touted guys in McCarthy or Darnold.
Okay, now there's been some positive Miami Dolphins, some negative. We're down on the Dolphins. Lombardi's down on the Dolphins. He was on yesterday. You picked the Dolphins to win the division. What do you think what Miami can do this year?
So I always look at these teams and I try to think about it as, all right, who do I think can be a Super Bowl caliber team and who do I think could just have a really good regular season? I think Miami's in the really good regular season camp. Like, I don't, in the playoff situation, I would never want to go ahead and go to war with the Miami Dolphins in Tua. I mean, we saw what happened last year in the freezing cold in Kansas City. I mean, like, again, it was only his first playoff start, but still, like, I don't really want to go to war with that. But in the regular season, I still think that this offense can be really dynamic. They added some more speed, which, I mean, it's hard to believe that you could even add more speed to that offense with what they have there. And Tua, he has his warts, but I mean, he also has a really good offensive-minded head coach in Mike McDaniel and awesome pass catchers in Tyreek Hill, who's probably the best wide receiver in football. The offensive line will always be a question mark with the Dolphins, just given the fact that Teron Armstead, their best offensive lineman, is the most injury-prone offensive lineman, I think, in the National Football League. But I think that they've surrounded him with enough weapons offensively and defensively. The Fangio loss hurts, but the way that those guys spoke about Fangio, right, wrong, or indifferent, clearly they didn't like him. And I think just him leaving, it was probably a good split for both parties. I don't think Fangio liked being in Miami, and I don't think the Dolphins players like Vic Fangio. So I think that Fangio will probably have success in Philly, and maybe just kind of changing the overall vibe of that defensive room can allow them to take another step forward defensively. And I think that when they get those guys healthy, being Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips, they'll once again be whole, because we forget they had so many injuries down the stretch on this Dolphins roster. They were playing with a mash unit in the playoffs against Kansas City. They really had no fighting chance to ultimately win that game. And they drafted DeChop Robinson to add to that pass rushing group. I do think the Dolphins, at least defensively, should be solid enough to where the offense can shine, and then they can win this division, which Buffalo's a little bit vulnerable. I don't think they're going to be bad. Like, they'll be a 10-11 win team. The Jets, I don't want any parts of that with the whole Robert Saleh. Like, I don't trust him at all. And I think New England might be the worst team in the league. So I think the Dolphins at price 2-1 is where you can get them to win the division. Is an interesting look.
Well, expand on the Saleh.
He just doesn't know what he's doing.
Okay.
I don't think he knows it. Like this whole I don't think it was a big deal that Rodgers missed minicamp. Like, in the grand scheme of things, it's 3 days. He was there throughout the entire spring with OTAs and all that stuff. But just like the fact that they botched the messaging on that just shows me that this guy is just completely incompetent. And just think about how he handled the Zach Wilson situation last year, how he's handled the McCall Hardman situation last year. He just does not have the P's and Q's. He's not dotting the I's, he's crossing the T's. Like, I just think that Robert Saleh probably just needs a little bit more help. I talk about this all the time with our front office executive, Michael Lombardi, here at VSiN on the GM Shuffle. Like, he just seems lost as a head coach. And whenever that's the case, I'm always going to try to play against that. I know the talent on paper, it looks good. They added to the offensive line, but I just don't trust this Jets unit. And who knows, if Rodgers coming off the Achilles at age 40, it's no guarantee that he's going to step right back into being an MVP caliber quarterback.
Or stay healthy.
Or stay healthy.
That's
for that
fair
matter.
Question.
There's so many question marks with this Jets roster. Defensively, it looks good, but I just don't think that they're just going to all of a sudden pick up and be, hey, here we go to the Super Bowl. Like, I think that is a little bit too much there in terms of the expectations.
Robert Saleh does have one thing going for him, one really important thing, and that's that Nathaniel Hackett's on his coaching staff.
I mean, they tried to replace him, and then all of a sudden they're walking back like, oh, no, we trust Nathaniel. We have full faith. Like, you were actively trying to replace your offensive coordinator and probably didn't do it because Rodgers said, get out of here with that. Like, I like it.
Rodgers said keep him.
It's my big concern, no doubt, the coaching staff. How about the Chargers? You also like the Chargers over?
It's simple to me. It's Jim Harbaugh replacing Brandon Staley. I mean, that is a massive coaching upgrade. And it's funny. The Brandon Staley Chargers sit there annually with win totals of 9.5, and now you're going to tell me that the Jim Harbaugh Chargers are 8.5?
With a last place schedule.
With a last place schedule. And let's not forget that Justin Herbert is one of the more talented quarterbacks in the NFL. Now you have a real head coach that's going to bring in a tough culture in a division where outside of Kansas City, I'm not really thrilled about what the Raiders or the Broncos are doing. I think the Chargers make the playoffs. I think that this is a no-brainer. I went over 8.5. I paid the minus. I think it was minus 140. I got it at over 8.5. I like them to make the playoffs this year. Just the coach and the quarterback combination is too good for me for them to not get to the postseason. I think the Chargers are going to have a really nice year this year.
All right, your Super Bowl pick, also Offensive Rookie of the Year, Defensive Rookie of the Year, some other markets that he likes as well. and listen to GM Shuffle podcast as always. And Youmans is on today as well with Femi and Michael Lombardi. More with Femi coming up next. You were anti-Jacksonville last year, Femi.
Yep.
And it looked like they were going to win the division.
Oh, me too.
And they blew it. So what do you think this? I can't believe the Lawrence contract, but what do you think of Jacksonville this year and that division? Matt stepping out, taking the Colts to win it.
Yeah, I like that. Getting a little spicy there. The Colts have a lot of upside. Anthony Richardson, we'll see what he is. I guess this is kind of year 2 for him, but it's essentially year 1 after only playing 4 games last season.
Basically like he's still a rookie. Yeah,
100%. Like, yeah, he played 4 games last year. We'll see what happens. But to me, Jacksonville is an interesting team. Like, I don't think from a betting standpoint, because I just agree with the win total being 8.5, but I'm curious to see what they look like defensively, just because they do have a lot of high pedigree first-round pick guys. And Trayvon Walker, like, a lot of people have kind of like given him a lot of you-know-what just because he hasn't lived up to being the number 1 overall pick. And we see what Hutchinson has done with Detroit. And everyone says, wow, the Jags really blew that one. But I actually thought Walker kind of came on at the end of last season. I think he can be a really productive player as they still figure out how to use him. Josh Allen, he signed the big contract there, so they locked him in. There's some pretty good players in that front 7, and the defensive coordinator they got over from Atlanta, a lot of people seem to like him. I think, if anything, Jacksonville could be good defensively this season. Now, offensively, I still have question marks about that offensive line. Not really thrilled about the wide receiver room. They drafted Brian Thomas out of LSU. Rookie receivers, they've recently have stepped in and played really well, but we'll see what he does now with Jacksonville. But Gabe Davis doesn't really do anything for me coming over from Buffalo. And Lawrence, he's got to prove it. He got the big contract. Kudos to him. He's one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the National Football League, but I think you still need him to take another step forward, because what we've seen over the last couple years is not good enough. And I think the win total now accurately reflects what the Jags are now this year versus what it was last year when they were sitting at like 9.5, even 10 in some spots as a win total.
How about the NFC East? You're a Cowboy guy. 17 of us, 17 of the 20 picked the Eagles to win the division.
I'm looking at the VSiN predictions here. Man, no love for America's team. And hey, I'll raise my hand. I picked the Eagles as well. I do think the Cowboys, if anything, are being a little bit underrated, if that's hard to believe, just because it's America's team. They're always overrated in the market. But hey, in the regular season, McCarthy and Dak have won a lot of games. Last 3 years, 12 games, each of those three seasons. Playoffs is a whole nother thing, but to win the East, that's a regular season market. It does a little bit. Look, it's a little funny seeing so many people on the Eagles. Now, I'm not going to pound the table for the Cowboys because I think there's some potential disaster scenarios for them, just because everyone talks about Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, Michael Parsons. What about all these contracts? The biggest contract that's a distraction is Mike McCarthy's contract. He's a lame duck head coach. Yep. And if things go poorly to start, is it just, oh, well, who cares? I mean, our coach is probably going to get fired, whatever. Like, this can go bad really, really quickly. But if they do start well, maybe the Cowboys can have another successful regular season. I think they're probably going to win 9-10 games again. I have them as a wild card team. They'll make the playoffs and probably bounce out by divisional round at the latest. But in the regular season, I think they're being a little bit disrespected given the fact that Dak and McCarthy together have won a lot of games, 36 over the last 3 years.
Not one person picked Tampa to win the division.
I agree with that.
I was shocked by that.
I don't like Tampa.
Who do you like?
I picked the Saints reluctantly because,
all right.
Yeah, believe me, when I put that into the guy, I felt that way too. I'm not a big Dennis Allen fan. He's one of the worst ATS coaches in the history of the National Football League. Derek Carr, not a fan of him either. He's Mr. Checkdown Artist and just puts up meaningless stats when the games are out of reach there. But I don't know. There's something about this Atlanta thing, and I'm not buying into it. And the fact that they're so heavily a favorite at odds-on prices. Kirk Cousins, he's also coming off the Achilles injury. There's no guarantee that he's healthy. Michael Penix, I'm a Washington Husky fan. I love Michael Penix, but he's still a rookie quarterback who's very injury prone, has had multiple ACL injuries in his career. So the Falcons, I'm just not there at the prices. So I tried to be a little bit contrarian. I took the New Orleans Saints, but I'm just not trusting Tampa either, given the fact that it's Todd Bowles and Baker Mayfield.
Okay. All right. There it is. How about Bo Nix, Offensive Rookie of the Year, 18-1?
Let's do it. Bo knows. I'm going to go back for more pain as I bet Bo Nix to win the Heisman last year. Let's keep it rolling here on the Bo Nix train. To me, I went and did this just because these rookie quarterbacks, I think we all think what they are, but we still don't know. Like, we don't know. We've never seen any of these guys play an NFL down. And I went with the longest price on a quarterback that's going to be a week 1 starter. You can bet on this right now at DraftKings. Quarterbacks to start week 1. Bo Nix for the Broncos is minus 400. I think the implication is that he's going to be the starting quarterback early on, which is something that you have to do if you want to win this award. Like, you can't be coming in at week 7 or so and win this award. It's just so difficult.
That's a big price.
That's too high.
Especially with Jarrett Stidham
that's
coming
too
back.
High. I agree.
I mean, Stidham, Peyton does like Stidham. That was one of the early free agent signings that they made a couple years ago. Zach Wilson, I don't think he'll ever be the starting quarterback for the Broncos, barring injury. But I do think because Peyton sort of kind of bet his job on Bo Nix. Like, he pounded the table and said, hey, Bo Nix is my guy. And one thing that like Michael Lombardi talked to me about was that when Peyton pounds his table for a quarterback, we should all listen. And even though I might have my preconceived notions with Bo Nix, I'm not the biggest Bo Nix fan. I just bet it because of the price. Like, I watched him play at Auburn. I watched him play at Oregon. He's okay. I don't think he's really good, but Sean Payton clearly thinks that he can work in his system. And one thing we have to keep in mind for Offensive Rookie of the Year, you don't really have to be on a winning team. As long as you're productive and you stay healthy, you're in the mix as a first-round quarterback. So I would kind of look at quarterbacks in this market. I know Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be a flashy object. Other wide receivers, Keon Coleman's a big price. I think a lot of people like him given the fact that he'll have a lot of opportunities in that Buffalo receiver room. I think because there's so many quarterbacks that are highly touted, it's going to be hard for it to not go to a QB. So I went with the QB with the longest odds, and Bo Nix, that's going to start week 1.
All right, how about Defensive Rookie of the Year?
This is another one where my biggest advice would be wait and see how things play out in the season. But if you do want to get involved with this market, look at someone like Chop Robinson for the Miami Dolphins. We just mentioned it in the last segment. Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb are coming off significant injuries. Those guys might not be ready to go early on that first month of the season. So Chop Robinson is going to be playing quite a bit of snaps. And that's what you really want for a Defensive Rookie of the Year. You want a first-round pick because the voters are not smart enough to vote on a guy who's a 3rd or 4th round or 5th round selection. They're all simpletons. So they're not going to do that. So look at a first-round pick and also look at a guy who's going to be on the field. I looked at it since 2008, the last 8 Defensive Rookie of the Years. In the first month of the season, they played in 67% of their team's defensive snaps. You cannot be some rotational guy that plays 30%, 40%. You're just not going to have enough opportunity to produce those numbers. And the easiest numbers to produce as a rookie, especially as a defender, is sacks. We all see sacks. They're the easy counting stats. Voters look at that stuff and say, oh, wow. And I think you really want guys that are going to get those opportunities. I reminded myself of Nolan Smith last year. A lot of people loved him. Oh, he's really good in training camp. He looks great. He didn't play for the Eagles. He's playing like 8% of the snaps every game because they had so many guys in front of him. Chop Robinson doesn't have that issue because of the injuries to Phillips and Chubb. He has a chance to go out there, and if he plays well early, maybe he's in the mix the entire season. So at the prices, I think Chop Robinson's an interesting look given the pedigree and also given the opportunities that he'll have early in the season.
We agree on our Super Bowl pick.
Oh, yeah?
There'll be a three-peat.
Look.
Youmans has the Chiefs going there, losing to the Eagles. You have Chiefs over Packers.
Packers. You got the Packers.
I got the Packers. I think in the NFC, if there's a potential quarterback that could elevate himself to being one of those guys, it's Jordan Love. So I picked the Packers to win the North. I picked them to win to ultimately go to the Super Bowl. I know that's probably the sexy pick. A lot of people like Green Bay based on how they finished last season, but I'm just not betting against Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes. Like, I know. Honestly, this might sound stupid. I'd rather lose money betting on the Chiefs than to go and bet someone else and then, oh, here's Mahomes again for another time. Like, I've learned my lessons. I bet Buffalo last year in the divisional round. I bet Baltimore in the AFC title game. I finally learned my lesson, bet Kansas City in the Super Bowl they won. I'm going to let one of these people tell me that they can beat Mahomes. Until then, I'm just going to ride the Chiefs train. So
if there's a team in the AFC that knocks off the Chiefs, who do you think it's going to be?
Cincinnati.
That's what I would say,
no
too.
hesitation.
Yeah.
Cincinnati. Joe Burrow's the only guy that's proven that he can go into Arrowhead and look Mahomes in the eye and beat him. Allen hasn't done it. Lamar hasn't done it.
I think Josh Allen did it, but his head coach screwed it up.
Yeah. But the head coach is still there, and Sean McDermott. So I'm not going down that path. It'll be Joe Burrow for me if it's not Kansas City. But I like Kansas City to go back and to make history.